today into a world you might not even know exists, but trust me, it's full of mystery, adventure, and surprising connections.
It really is.
Think about walking on a beach, anywhere in the world, and finding something unexpected washed ashore, maybe a strange bottle, a piece of driftwood, a cool shell. There's a kind of romance to those objects, right?
Yeah.
Carrying stories from far off lands.
Absolutely. And our sources today, they reveal that not all of these arrivals are just random debris. Some are actually, well, intrepid travelers, natural voyagers propelled across oceans.
We're talking about sea beans and other incredible drift seeds.
Exactly.
Yes. Our source material for this deep dive is a collection of articles and notes from the Drifting Seed newsletter. It's a publication truly dedicated to these amazing ocean travelers and the passionate people who find them.
Yeah, it's a real treasure trove of information.
Yeah.
Our mission here is basically to pull out the most interesting facts, the wildest stories, and the genuine insights hidden within these pages. We want to give you a real shortcut, to understanding this unique corner of the natural world.
We're going to explore everything from the nitty gritty of how you actually identify these little things to the global community of folks who are, well, obsessed with finding them. And even the surprising science behind their epic journeys. Get ready for some unexpected identification methods, a few quirky characters, definitely a look at the environmental connections, and maybe even a dream or two mentioned in there.
Sounds good. So let's start with the fundamental challenge, right? You found something on the beach that looks like a sea bean. How do you know what it actually is? The sources lay out a few paths you could take.
Right. There's the sort of academic purist approach. Find a plant taxonomist.
Good luck with that on a Saturday afternoon.
Exactly. As the sources point out, it's highly unlikely you'll have one on speed dial. And even if you do, their standard method usually involves germinating and growing the seed to maturity for positive ID.
Which can take ages.
Yeah.
A year, maybe more. And like you said, your precious seed might not even sprout, or it could just rot.
Plus, you basically sacrifice the seed for science. Not ideal for a collector who wants to, keep their find.
Exactly. It's thorough, but impractical for most finds. Then there's a more modern scientific method, specifically highlighted for Mucuna seeds, chemical analysis.
Oh, okay. Tell me about this. This sounds maybe a bit more accessible. Or maybe not.
Well, it's certainly more definitive for that species. If the compound dopa is present in the seed, it's definitely a Mucuna. The sources mention these chemotaxonomic studies confirming only Mucuna seeds have this capability.
Wow, 100% reliable for Mucuna. That sounds incredibly useful. Does the source get into how you do this analysis, or like how accessible is that high-tech training they mentioned?
It doesn't go deep into the lab procedure details, no. But it emphasizes that while it requires some training, it's not exactly rocket scientist level stuff.
Okay.
The big advantage, as you noted, is that you get to keep the seed. You can take a tiny microbiopsy, seal the little hole with super glue, and you can still display it or potentially even plant it later.
Oh, that's clever.
But the obvious drawback is, as you suspected, this kind of chemical analysis isn't something most beachcombers have, just lying around.
Right, which brings us to the method most people actually rely on, the one you can do right there on the beach with a sharp eye, just looking at the seed, seed morphology.
Precisely. This is the non-technical approach, but it's incredibly powerful once you learn the patterns. The key concept here, especially for identifying Mucuna seeds, is what the sources call the smiley.
The smiley. I love that term. Makes it sound so friendly. What exactly are we looking for?
It's a non-technical name, for a specific feature. A raised, darkened mark or ridge near the hilum, which is essentially the scar where the seed is attached inside the fruit.
Okay, the scar. Got it.
On Mucuna seeds, this mark is often black and distinctively blocky or curved upward, really looking like a smile. The newsletter uses photos extensively to show you how different this smiley looks on various Mucuna species. It's quite helpful.
So you're training your eye to spot that specific shape and location near the attachment scar, that specific look.
Exactly. And you contrast this with other common drift seeds, like Dioclea, which the sources state do not have a smiley.
So smiley means Mucuna, no smiley means probably not Mucuna.
Generally, yeah. Although they do mention some discussion within the community about whether a smiling Dioclea might actually exist. Adds a little mystery.
Keeps things interesting.
Right. They also use morphology to debunk persistent myths, like the idea that Bernie beans and Mucuna from Kauai come from the same plant. The sources point out their morphological differences are, well, vast. They look quite different.
So beyond the smiley, you're generally looking at the sea's overall shape, size, color, and surface texture, like the Mucuna from Kauai being notoriously smooth and shiny, or that description of a rare Cathy's bean being a distinct dark red wine or pink with black blotches. Specifically not the totally black or tan ones you might see illustrated elsewhere. It really is all about careful observation.
And where do you train that eye? On the beach, of course. Beachcombing for sea beans is the hunt. The appeal is totally wrapped up in the thrill of the find. Those moments when you spot something special lying amongst the seaweed and shells, and you actually recognize it. That aha moment.
The sources mention people finding these treasures all over the place. Florida, Texas, the Yucatan Peninsula, the Dutch coast, the UK, Ireland, Molokai, and Hawaii, Washington State.
Yeah.
It's truly a global pursuit.
It really is, but it's definitely not without its challenges, as documented in these newsletter stories. Rapid beach cleaning is a constant enemy.
Oh, yeah.
Like the scraper plow operation in Fort Lauderdale that can clear the beach before beaners even get there sometimes.
Oh, that's heartbreaking. A storm washes up all these potential finds, and the city just scoops it all away.
Yeah. Then you have the environmental hurdles trying to hunt in the intense Texas heat with a heat index of 115 degrees Fahrenheit.
No, thank you.
Or having promising finds quickly buried again by sprinkling rain and strong winds, like one story from Fort Lauderdale described. You see it, then poof, it's gone under the sand.
And some obstacles are just unexpected. One story details dodging land crabs and even tarantulas on jungle roads in Mexico while trying to reach prime beach sites.
Tarantula, okay, that adds a whole new level of adrenaline to the hunt. Seriously.
All right. And if you do have a successful day, getting your treasures home can be an adventure too.
Yeah.
Like the story of a backpack full of sea beans causing a stir with impassive airport security employees.
I can only imagine the conversation. Sir, what exactly are these?
Exactly. The newsletter introduces a great concept from an article about the lantern tree to help sort your finds. The keeper versus the leverite.
Ah, yes.
A keeper is, well, obvious, a seed or object worth collecting and keeping.
Makes sense.
And a leverite, let me guess, leave her right where you found her.
Precisely. Leave her right where you found her. Examples given of typical leverites include hog plum and tropical almond, and nutmeg.
Nutmeg? Why leverite?
Well, they cheekily note it's a leverite unless you want it for eggnog.
Okay, fair enough.
But they also show that sometimes a perceived leverite can be transformed, like this collector, Bill Blazak, polishing laurelwood seeds, which aren't usually highly valued. And they turned out quite nice, actually.
So even the leverites can sometimes be keepers. The sources are full of these specific, notable finds that really convey the excitement, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. Finding a monster Mary bean, one that was 31 millimeters long compared to the usual 20 millimeter, with this golden brown glow that must feel like hitting the jackpot.
Totally. Or finding a red hamburger bean in Ireland after a storm. I mean, just think about the incredible journey that must have taken across the Atlantic.
For sure. Or someone collecting hundreds of seahearts and hamburger beans on the Costa Maya in just a few hours. And the ultimate rarity mentioned finding a Cathy's bean, one described as having a distinct bullseye appearance, with the newsletter noting that less than 20 Cathy's beans are known to have ever been found anywhere.
Less than 20.
Yeah.
Ever. That is a truly rare and special prize.
You bet. It's one of those finds that gets the whole community buzzing.
So moving beyond just the common finds and how to spot them, these sources really open up a whole world of fascinating seeds and other drift that make it to shore.
It's definitely not limited to just seahearts and hamburgers, as beautiful as they are. They talk about the sheer beauty of the lanterntree seed, Hernandia sonora, and how surprisingly rare it is on Florida's east coast.
Yeah, never heard of that one.
It can be confused with other seeds like nutmeg or the large soapberry, which is also called black pearl, or the little marble oxy seed. But the cool thing is, the sources say those confusing lookalikes are also considered keepers in their own right.
So even if you misidentify, you might still have found something cool.
Pretty much. They also mention seeds with fantastic names and backstories. Jade vine, tiger's claw, or coral tree bean, and the gray nickernet.
Oh, that nickernet story is particularly wild, isn't it? Using them against land crabs?
Yeah, dropping them in the crab burrows, only to find later that nickerbean vines were sprouting from the crab holes.
An unexpected bit of unintended ecological impact from pest control.
Right. They also mention Job's tears, which are apparently popular for jewelry, and seeds tied to specific geographic origins, like the distinct Mucuna from Kauai and Hawaii, or the poisonous yellow oleander from Molokai.
Poisonous, yikes.
Yeah, described as having this angular, almost happy-faced smile appearance, even though it's not naturally buoyant. Also, lulu palm seeds from a small Molokai islet.
And some seeds found way outside their natural range in temperate regions are likely human transported before they even started drifting, right?
That seems likely for some finds, yes, like the shea nut found in the Netherlands, originating from West Africa, probably lost during transport for making butter or chocolate.
Makes sense.
Or box fruit, also found in the Netherlands. It's common in the Indo-Malaysian area and has been introduced globally by humans. The one found was likely refuse, maybe from flower decorations, rather than genuine drift from its native home.
And things like fermented cacao beans, which aren't viable, or sunflower seeds, even castor beans found flowering on Texel at Dutch Island.
Yeah, those all point to items lost, discarded, or escaped cultivation, making their way into the drift currents.
And the drift isn't just seeds, is it? The sources detail all sorts of other intriguing objects and organisms.
Definitely not. Tropical drift, like the sea pea, for example, reappeared on the Dutch coast after a long absence, carried by the currents.
But it gets even more intriguing when you consider objects traveling truly vast distances, like those glass fishing floats.
Oh yeah, the glass floats are classic. One specific example found had a trademark pointing to Spanish origin from a manufacturer operating since 1900.
Wow, that's specific.
Yep. They were typically blown in a mold, often dark green or clear glass, and their buoyancy and durability allow them to survive long transoceanic journeys. Amazing they don't break off.
There were some truly mysterious finds too, like the stranding of thousands of crucifix catfish skulls on Texas beaches, creating what was described as a massive graveyard. That sounds eerie.
It does. Or kapok thorns, which the newsletter authors give these wonderfully descriptive names like Twin Peaks or resembling a Madonna costume.
Huh.
You gotta love the imagery.
Definitely paints a picture. And inevitably, the drift includes a significant amount of human-generated pollution.
Sadly, yes. The sources track plastic debris in estuaries, listing items like plastic swabs, sticks, bottles, packaging, foam blocks. It really highlights how even common household items persist for years and travel vast distances.
Yeah, they mentioned tracing their degradation and origins too.
Right. And fishing gear tags, buoys, pots also turns up frequently. Lost items, even a hypodermic syringe or a felt tip pen advertising on a mall in New York.
A pen from New York drifting somewhere else.
They even mention high power boats, likely used for smuggling, appearing as drift after being abandoned or sunk.
It's a stark reminder of our footprint, isn't it? Carried everywhere by the currents. And the ocean also carries marine life itself as drift.
Oh, yeah. By the wind sailors, Portuguese man-o'-war, purple sea snails, those little coiled ram's horn squid endoskeletons.
Turtles too, right? Sometimes with hitchhikers.
Exactly. Turtles, sometimes with Columbus crabs hitching a ride on their shells, and various algae like egg rack and sargassum. The drift truly is a snapshot of everything that interacts with the ocean's surface and currents.
It is. And that brings us nicely to the underlying science. How does this drifting actually happen? And what's the bigger picture it connects to?
One key area the sources cover is flotation experiments. How long do these seeds and fruits actually stay afloat? It's a crucial question.
Right, because that
哦，我好像去那个按到了一个按钮，I accidentally let me restart it。这是会出直播的时候会出的一点小问题，因为我把它放在键盘上。I shouldn't put those seeping on my keyboard。大家请稍等一下哦。Okay.
It's 1900.
Wow, that's specific.
Yep.
Mysterious font.
How does flexing China
home potentially?
and they did actions touch on how plan for that scale of Deepwater Horizon disaster was tracked and thankfully remained largely in the plant's convection.
Nice.
How dry it is, maybe even the seed's shape or density. They all play a role in how long it floats.
Exactly. And these floating objects, whether they're natural seeds or human debris, become fascinating tools for tracking ocean currents.
Like messages in a bottle, but more scientific.
Kind of, yeah. People like Dr. Curtis Ebbesmeyer specialized in exactly this tracking flotsam.
He's the guy who tracked the rubber ducks and seahearts, right?
That's him, famous for that. But the sources also mention his insights on the massive 2011 Japanese tsunami debris. He predicted its arrival on the U.S. West Coast and vividly described it as flotsam on steroids.
Chilling. That must have raised huge environmental concerns. All that styrofoam, potentially harmful materials washing up across the Pacific.
Absolutely. And the sources note a definite lack of a major organized cleanup plan for that scale of debris. It's a huge challenge.
Yeah, that.
They also touch on how flotsam tracking relates to things like oil spills, mentioning how oil from the Deepwater Horizon disaster was tracked and thankfully remained largely in the Gulf, not fouling Atlantic waters as much as feared.
Okay, that's good to know.
And they discuss the major current systems like the Gulf Stream and the North Atlantic Drift, which are the literal engines bringing all this tropical drift seeds, debris, everything, all the way to temperate coasts in places like Europe.
So those currents are the highways.
Pretty much. There's even mention of observed drift patterns, like the direction of coconut cone points sometimes seeming to align into the wind, suggesting subtle interactions at the surface. It's complex stuff.
But beyond the sheer interest in collecting and the science of travel, the sources pose a really thought-provoking question about why this all matters in a larger sense. They introduced this through the story of Billy Seabean.
Ah, yes, Billy Seabean.
Billy Seabean.
Oh.
I'm intrigued. What's the story there? Who is this guy?
This is based on a real collector named Bill Blazek, who apparently set a goal to collect 100,000 seeds.
100,000. Okay, that's a lot.
It is. At first glance, amassing such a huge collection might seem like an extreme hobby, almost quirky, perhaps.
You mean like a slightly eccentric hoarder of beach treasures? Something like that?
Maybe that's how some see it. But the vision presented in the source is much bigger. It connects this kind of large-scale collecting to future scenarios, potentially grim ones related to climate change, global heating, and sea level rise inundating coastal ecosystems.
Okay. How does collecting beans connect to that?
Well, the idea is, in this potential future, natural coastal seed banks could be destroyed by rising seas or storms.
Ah, I see.
And these collected sea beans, many of which are specifically adapted for long-distance ocean travel and survival, could potentially be needed to regreen parts of the planet, particularly lost tropical forests. They're tough, viable seeds from those very ecosystems.
So it's almost presented as a foresightful act, like a form of genetic preservation through passionate collecting. That's quite a thought.
Exactly. The sources draw an analogy to Johnny Appleseed, who spread apple seeds across the American frontier.
Okay, no.
Just as he helped pioneers establish orchards, ocean currents have spread coconuts across the globe for millennia, shaping tropical cultures.
Right. Coconuts are everywhere in the tropics.
And they add the fun fact that apples float too, so maybe Johnny's apples did some drifting of their own.
Huh. Maybe so. That Johnny Appleseed analogy really brings it home. And you mentioned coconuts shaping cultures.
Yes, they highlight the cultural significance, especially in India. Coconuts have apparently been used as currency. They're offered to the sea god Varuna, broken at shrines and temples.
Wow.
And their use in festivals like Raksha Bandhan is even linked to the timing of the lunar calendar and tides. It shows a deep, long-standing connection between a drift seed and human tradition.
It's fascinating how these simple objects connect to science, history, and even potential future resilience. And underpinning this whole pursuit from the collecting to the science is a vibrant community, isn't there?
Definitely. The sources paint a clear picture of a worldwide network of what they affectionately call beaners.
Beaner. Okay.
We've heard about them finding seeds in Florida, Texas, the Yucatan, the Netherlands, Ireland. All over these are passionate people connecting over this shared interest, often through the newsletter itself.
And a central gathering place sounds like the Sea Bean Symposium in Cocoa Beach, Florida. What actually goes on there? Is it just showing off beans?
It sounds like much more than that. The newsletter articles describe it as a really lively event. Activities include things like the Bean-a-thon, where people collect for a specific time limit.
Like a speed collecting contest.
Sort of. And the OD bean contest, where people enter their shiniest seaheart, largest Mary's bean, rarest piece of sea glass, and so on. Bragging rights, you know?
Of course, friendly competition.
Right. And there are also presentations on a wide range of topics related to drift from glass floats and sea creatures to practical skills like how to polish seeds properly.
So it sounds like a blend of friendly competition, show and tell, and some real deep learning too.
Absolutely. It's clearly a social hub, a place to meet friends, share your latest finds, compare notes, and learn directly from experienced collectors and experts in the field.
And sea beans aren't just kept as specimens in jars, right? They're transformed into art and expression.
For sure. Jewelry making is mentioned, featuring the work of people like Ruth Smith or Stephanie Bernstein, and the popularity of using Job's tears for necklaces.
Job's tears, right?
The sources even mention the Bead Museum in Arizona as a place dedicated to objects of adornment and cultural expression, and highlight places where significant collections or books have been donated, like Ed Perry, the newsletter editor, donating his book collection to a research library. It shows the value placed on this knowledge.
That's great. Preserving the information.
And the newsletter shares these personal anecdotes that really capture the depth of this passion and the connections it fosters. Someone recounts a dream of finding seahearts in a junkyard after a flood.
A junkyard. Weird place for sea beans.
Totally weird setting, but the feeling described was still that powerful joy feeling of discovery. It shows how ingrained it becomes.
It really is about the joy these small objects bring. Sharing collections with friends, or even that story about a planned guy thing fishing trip.
Oh yeah, that one was funny.
It turned out to be less about catching fish and more about telling stories, sharing beer, and keeping an eye out for interesting drift along the shore.
Exactly. And visiting people based solely on this shared interest, like catching up with Liz McCabe, who was described as a 100-year-old sea beaner at the time. It emphasizes the strong, often intergenerational community connection.
That's wonderful. And they highlight the people who really contribute to this world. Ed Perry as the dedicated newsletter editor, for one.
Absolutely. And researchers and authors who publish in the newsletter, like the Sullivans, Williams, K-Day, Ebsmeyer, Hewitt, Bernstein, Bryant, Berenson, Rulin, their work adds so much depth.
And the passionate collectors themselves, like Bill Blazek, Alice Lowe, Nan Rhodes, sharing their finds and stories with the community, often through their newsletters pages. They're the eyes on the ground.
It truly is a rich tapestry woven from the objects themselves and the people who cherish them, all propelled by curiosity and a deep connection to the ocean.
So pulling back from this deep dive, wow, we've traveled quite a distance ourselves, haven't we? From tiny seeds, embarking on vast ocean voyages, learned how to identify them, explored the incredible variety of things that drift natural and not so natural.
Right.
Touched on the science that explains their journeys, and met the dedicated community that seeks them out. Even considering the potential future importance of these humble items.
They're clearly far more than just random beach finds, aren't they? They are clues carrying stories from distant lands, they are connections to ocean currents and global ecosystems, and they are the focus of a passionate worldwide community.
It really makes you look at the beach, or any waterway, differently. What other incredible travelers, natural or human-made, might be washing ashore near you right now?
What hidden stories do they carry, just waiting to be discovered?
The next time you're by the water, perhaps you'll take a moment to look a little closer.
You really never know what piece of the world or what remarkable seed might have just arrived at your feet.